The washer beeped twice. That's what started it. Two short, harmless sounds at 6:11 a.m. on a Friday morning. I hadn't planned to do laundry that day. In fact, I hadn't planned to be home at all. I was supposed to be waking up beside her at the Rosewick Inn, with its too expensive sheets and overpriced room service waffles. But instead, I stood in our narrow kitchen in yesterday's clothes, staring at the glowing light of a finished spin cycle. She had come home an hour earlier. No suitcase. No coffee. No apology. She hadn't even looked at me. Too tired to talk, she mumbled, dropping her bag and walking straight into the bedroom. She didn't shower. She didn't even take off her earrings. She just collapsed face down in bed like a dropped marionette. I stared at her back for a while. Wondered if this was what 9 years of marriage came to, someone forgetting which day they're supposed to love you. When I finally opened the washer, I only meant to grab a clean shirt. I hadn't even known she had done a load. But there, tangled in a bundle of wet whites, was a crumpled ivory blouse. It wasn't hers. I knew that instantly, not because I'm some fashion expert, but because I'd never seen it before. And I know everything in her wardrobe. I've zipped it, buttoned it, folded it, and paid for half of it. This blouse had a tag from a boutique in Red Bank. Expensive. Subtle gold threading near the collar. And faintly, beneath the detergent, was the smell of someone else's cologne. Not perfume. Cologne. I lifted it like it might bite me. That's when my stomach flipped. I reached into the pocket of her coat still hanging by the door. Something stiff. I pulled out a printed photo, folded into thirds. My fingers trembled as I opened it. 2 people. A rooftop. Wine. String lights. Her. Her dress. Her smile. Her hand on someone else's chest. The timestamp said 10:46 p.m. That was the exact moment I was standing in our kitchen, alone, watching our anniversary dinner burn in the oven because she had texted, "Work emergency, rain check? I love you." My legs gave out, and I sank to the floor. And then something worse happened. I flipped the photo over. Written in her handwriting in blue ink. Caleb, best night ever. Finally. Finally. Not suddenly. Not accidentally. Finally. Which means she'd been planning this long before the lie. Long before the emergency. Long before she smiled at me that morning and kissed me on the cheek. And I hadn't even found the voicemail yet. I don't know how long I sat there on the cold tile, holding that photo like it was some kind of evidence in a crime scene. Because that's what it felt like. A crime. Something had been stolen from me, only there was no broken window, no forced entry. Just trust, quietly drained out of my life like water leaking through an invisible crack in the floor. The sun had already started pushing through the blinds when I finally stood up. My back ached. My mouth was dry. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was move like a ghost through the house. I opened the fridge, not to eat, just to feel like I was doing something normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. The wine I chilled for our anniversary was still there. The strawberries she asked me to get. The leftover lamb stew I made 2 nights ago that she barely touched. Suddenly, everything in that fridge felt like a lie. My phone buzzed. I grabbed it without thinking, reflex. My brain still hoped, in some delusional, pathetic way, that maybe she'd sent me something, an explanation, a confession, a reason that would somehow undo the gut punch from that photo. It was a notification. One new voicemail. I froze. She never calls. We text. Like normal people. We haven't exchanged voicemails in years. I tapped it, expecting some robocall from the dentist or maybe a spam message. But the second I hit play, I heard her voice. And it wasn't meant for me. The recording started mid-sentence. There was wind in the background, and she sounded breathless, almost giggly. Still can't believe you said that, she laughed. God, Caleb, you're so bad. If he ever found out, he'd probably just... I don't know. Fold in on himself like he always does. I'd almost feel guilty. Almost. Then silence. Some fumbling noise. A soft moan. Then her whispering, "You know I'm his whole world, right?" That's what makes it so exciting. He has no idea. The recording ended there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I think part of me just died right in that moment. Not because of what she said, honestly. I already suspected the truth, but because of how casually she said it. Like it wasn't even a betrayal. Like I was some side character in her story. A minor inconvenience. The man who folds in on himself. And she was right. That's exactly what I did. I sank to the kitchen floor again, forehead against the cabinet, trying not to vomit. I didn't even know when she had recorded that voicemail. Had she meant to send it to him? Did she hit the wrong button? Or was this some cosmic joke? One cruel misclick that finally dragged everything into the light? I looked at the timestamp, 12:17 a.m., roughly 2 hours before she walked through the door like nothing had happened. My hands were shaking, but I didn't cry. I wish I had. I wish I could have just let it out and purged it from my system. But instead, I did what I always do. I got up. I cleaned the kitchen. I threw out the strawberries. I washed the wine glasses that we never used. And then, like some kind of sleep-deprived detective in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from, I picked up her tote bag and started going through it. Inside, I found her charger, 2 receipts from the wine bar, both for 2 people, a set of travel-sized toiletries, a crumpled parking ticket dated the night before, and at the very bottom, a hotel keycard. It wasn't even hidden. Room 306, Briar Ridge Suites. Less than 20 minutes from our house. She didn't even bother to go far. That's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken one-night lapse or a kiss that got out of hand. This was planned, measured, scheduled like a business meeting. And she hadn't just lied to me. She'd made a joke of me. A weak man, too easy to fool, too slow to notice. And now I had a decision to make. Do I confront her while she's still sleeping in the bed we shared for nearly a decade? Or do I wait to see how far the lie will go before it eats her alive from the inside? But deep down, I already knew the answer. Because the man who folds in on himself doesn't go to war. He watches. And when the time is right, he burns the whole truth down in front of her. I didn't confront her that morning. I didn't wake her up or yell or cry or wave the hotel keycard in her face like I wanted to. I couldn't. I just watched her sleep, curled up on her side like she used to when she actually wanted to fall asleep next to me, not just next to someone. Her makeup had smudged across the pillow. Her lipstick was still faintly there, and I hated how familiar it looked. How much I still loved her even when the entire illusion was crumbling around me. I had this image in my head, me standing over her, holding that keycard like it was some kind of justice. But all I could do was stare. Because the truth is, I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to fight. I wanted a reason. A single, stupid, human reason that could explain how we ended up here. But deep down, I already knew. There wasn't going to be one. So I waited for her to fully fall asleep. I listened to her breathing, slow and even, like the night hadn't broken anything inside her. Then I slid on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and drove to Briar Ridge Suites. It was the kind of place designed to feel fancier than it was cheap perfume trying to pass as luxury. The clerk barely looked up when I walked in. Just nodded at me like I was one of them, the quiet, guilty men who didn't book the room but came to clean up after it. I didn't ask for access. I didn't have to. I just walked straight past the lobby, up the stairs, and down the hallway toward room 306. My heart was punching against my ribs with every step. The card slipped once in my fingers as I slid it into the lock, and for a moment I actually hoped it wouldn't work. That maybe this was all some cosmic misunderstanding, and I was about to feel ashamed for ever doubting her. But the green light blinked. The door clicked. I stepped inside. It hit me all at once, the smell of stale perfume, synthetic linen, wine, and something else I couldn't name. Intimacy that didn't belong to me. The bed was made, but not perfectly. Like someone tried to hide the mess quickly. A wine glass still sat on the desk, lipstick stained. There was a napkin with Caleb's name written in her handwriting, circled with a heart. My stomach turned. I didn't move. I didn't touch anything. I just stood there, breathing it in, letting it choke me, letting the reality soak into my bones. I walked to the bathroom, and that's when I saw it, her necklace on the counter. The one I gave her for our 5th anniversary. She never takes it off. Except, apparently, when she's spending the night with someone who isn't her husband. And then I saw the second wine glass, shoved under the chair, empty, but clearly used. 2 people. 1 night. No shame. I wanted to scream, to shatter every glass surface in that room. But instead, I sat down. In the chair she probably sat in hours before. I just sat there. I don't know for how long. I thought about how quiet everything had become between us lately. How she started working late. How she stopped laughing at my dumb jokes. How she began pulling away without ever saying why. And I hated myself for not seeing this coming. For being so easy to deceive. I took photos. Of the wine glasses. Of the napkin. Of the necklace. Not because I planned to use them. But because I knew there would come a time when she would pretend it never happened. When she would say, it wasn't what you think. And I would need something real to hold in my hands to remind myself I wasn't crazy. I left the room without taking anything. I didn't even close the door properly. Let the next guest walk into the leftover sin of betrayal if they wanted. By the time I got home, she was still asleep, still curled up, still peaceful. I sat in the car for 10 full minutes, just staring at the steering wheel. I kept asking myself, what do I do now? Do I leave? Do I wait? Do I confront her and finally ask the question clawing at the back of my throat? Or do I do what she did, pretend? Pretend it didn't matter. Pretend I hadn't already seen the inside of room 306. I walked back in, shut the door quietly, and made coffee. She still hadn't woken up, but I wasn't going to let her sleep through the reckoning. So I printed one of the photos. Just one. The one with her handwriting on the napkin. And I placed it right next to her pillow before I left for work. Let her wake up to the same silence she handed me. Let her feel what it's like to open your eyes and find out the story isn't just broken, it's already over. And I still hadn't said a single word. Not yet. But that moment was coming. When I returned home later that evening, the first thing I noticed was that the house smelled different. Not like a new candle or food, but like tension. Thick, invisible, pressing against my chest the second I stepped through the door. The lights were dimmed, the TV off, the hallway unnervingly quiet. I heard the faint creak of the floorboards above me. She was pacing. Good. I dropped my bag gently by the door. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want drama. I just wanted honesty, even if it came dressed in cheap excuses and shaky logic. And yet, a part of me already knew I wouldn't get even that. I made it to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the table. No phone, no distractions. Just me, staring at the grain of the wood, waiting for her to come down and pretend she hadn't already cracked us open beyond repair. It took her 12 minutes. I counted every second. She walked down slowly, barefoot, her hair tied up in that way she usually reserved for laundry days and hangovers. Her face was unreadable, her jaw clenched just enough to reveal she'd spent the entire day debating what mask to wear. She was holding the photo, the one I'd left by her pillow, tightly in her hand, like it was a grenade that hadn't gone off yet. She didn't speak at first. Just stood there, across from me, eyes flicking between the photo and my face. I don't know what this is, she finally said. Not angry. Just hollow. I blinked. Really? You don't recognize your own handwriting? She didn't answer. Her silence was louder than denial. She sat down across from me, slowly, like every movement cost her something. Darvin, I can explain. God. Those words. I can explain. I wanted to laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because it was so insultingly predictable. It was like watching someone recite lines from a bad script, one written by someone who thought love was stupid and loyalty was optional. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the table. Then explain. She opened her mouth, closed it, looked down at the napkin again like she was hoping the words would disappear. Then she said it. I didn't mean for it to happen. Not sorry. Not, I made a mistake. Just, I didn't mean for it. I shook my head. What didn't you mean to do exactly? Pack an overnight bag? Book a hotel room? Leave on our anniversary? Come home at sunrise with someone else's perfume on your skin? She winced at that. For the first time, a crack in the mask. It wasn't supposed to be then, she said quietly. Caleb, he was falling apart, and he needed someone. Don't, I cut her off. Don't make this about his emotional needs. There was a pause. She looked down again. I could see her spinning the story in her head, trying to craft a version that made her less monstrous. But the truth was too big to bury. I was going to tell you, she finally whispered. When? I asked. After dessert? After we renewed our vows? After the next anniversary you skipped? She didn't answer. Her shoulders sagged like the weight of her own decisions had finally become unbearable. And for a brief moment, I almost felt bad. Almost. I didn't want to hurt you, she mumbled. I laughed. Not loudly, but enough that she flinched. You didn't want to hurt me, I repeated. You just wanted to do what felt good. And hope I stayed stupid long enough for you to live with yourself. The words hung there between us, ugly and final. She looked at me, eyes wide, a mixture of panic and shame flooding her expression. But it was too late. You can't outrun the truth once it's already breathing in the room with you. I was lonely, she said suddenly. You were always so busy. You stopped seeing me. I stared at her. You could have said something. Instead, you disappeared. A beat passed. Then another. Then she whispered, I think I wanted you to find out. And that was it. That was the quiet bombshell. Not the affair. Not the hotel. Not the photos. But that she wasn't just careless, she was cruel. Somewhere in her heart, she had wanted to be caught. Wanted me to see her with someone else so she wouldn't have to say the words out loud. She stood up, slowly, and walked out of the room without another word. No apology. No tears. No begging. Just silence. And I sat there for over an hour, watching the last embers of our marriage flicker in the dim light of a kitchen we used to laugh in. I still hadn't decided what to do next. I didn't know if I wanted to leave or make her feel the weight of everything she'd burned. But I knew one thing. There was more she wasn't telling me, and I was going to find it. The next morning was gray. The kind of sky that doesn't pour, just presses on everything like a wet cloth, heavy, suffocating, and still. I barely slept. I laid there with my eyes open for hours, staring at the ceiling, tracing invisible cracks and wondering how long they'd been there. How long had everything been cracking around me before I finally noticed? Leona wasn't home when I got up. No note. No text. Just absence. Like her body had followed where her mind went months ago. I stood at the window, watching the driveway where her car had been parked the night before. It was gone now. I didn't know where she went, but I wasn't surprised. Avoidance was her new love language. She wasn't answering texts, and I wasn't chasing anymore. Instead, I made myself coffee and sat at the table, letting the silence wrap around me like fog. That's when I glanced at the extra set of keys in the bowl by the door. Her spare car key. She'd left it there last week when we switched vehicles for maintenance and forgot to grab it back. I stared at that key for a long minute. Something inside me pulsed, hesitant, ashamed, but unrelenting. I didn't want to become the guy who snooped, who searched for secrets like a sad detective in a broken marriage. But I was that guy now, wasn't I? I didn't choose this version of me. She made him. She fed him with silence and sleepless nights and half-lies told with perfectly steady eyes. So I grabbed the key and walked outside. Her car was still there. She must have walked to wherever she was going or gotten a ride from someone else. Maybe Caleb. The thought made my chest tighten, but I pushed it down and unlocked the door. The inside smelled like her. That soft vanilla lotion she wore that made strangers ask what perfume it was. I used to love it. Now it made my stomach churn. I searched the front first, glove box, center console, side compartments. Nothing out of the ordinary. Receipts, gum, napkins. But then I checked under the passenger seat. Something caught. Wedged between the seat and the floor mat was a folded envelope, crushed, wrinkled, but sealed. No name. No stamp. Just a faint smudge of lipstick on the corner. I stared at it, fingers frozen mid-reach. Something about it felt wrong. Not because it was there, but because it wasn't meant to be found. I pulled it free, unfolded it slowly, and read. It wasn't long, maybe 8 lines, but every one of them gutted me in a different way. I know this isn't sustainable, but neither is pretending I'm still his. You make me feel real again. Every touch, every glance. I think about you even when he's speaking. I don't want to be a liar forever. I want to choose you. No signature, but I didn't need one. She wrote it, and she hadn't sent it, which meant she either changed her mind or hadn't worked up the courage yet. Either way, it told me more than she ever had with her mouth. It told me that she didn't just cheat. She left, quietly, emotionally, bit by bit. Every dinner she skipped, every bedtime kiss she pretended to forget, every small, avoidable absence that piled up into this empty canyon between us. She'd been gone long before that hotel room. But what struck me hardest was the last line. I want to choose you. Not, I love you. Not, I'm sorry. It was about choosing, and I was no longer the choice. I wasn't even the background. I sat in her car for what must have been over an hour, letter still trembling in my hand. I thought I'd cry. I didn't. I just sat there, my mouth dry, my eyes staring at the same cracked corner of the dashboard she'd once begged me to fix. I had given her everything. My time. My softness. My effort. I was the guy who made her soup when she was sick, who memorized her coffee orders, who held her through 3 job rejections and never once let her feel small. But none of that mattered now, because someone else made her feel real. And I was just comfortable. Eventually, I folded the letter and took it inside. I didn't confront her when she returned that evening, hair damp, face expressionless. She mumbled something about grabbing groceries and disappeared upstairs. I said nothing. I placed the letter in her jewelry box, right beside the wedding ring she'd stopped wearing 3 weeks ago, claiming it was too tight lately. Let her find it. Let her know I saw it all now, no more illusions. But I wasn't done, because something told me Caleb wasn't just a coworker, and what I'd uncovered so far was only the surface. It was time to stop mourning. It was time to dig. It was strange how calm I felt after placing the letter in her jewelry box. Not peaceful, not relieved, but settled, like a switch had flipped in my brain, and I was finally allowed to stop pretending I didn't see the fire consuming everything around me. There was a strange clarity in it, like fog lifting from a battlefield I hadn't realized I was standing in. And in that clarity, I began seeing things I hadn't let myself see before. I started by pulling up the messages on our shared laptop. She thought I was too much of a Luddite to know her passwords, but I wasn't. I just respected boundaries until she burned them all down. And now I had nothing left to guard. She hadn't deleted her chats with Caleb. Not all of them. Most of their texting was through some other app, one I didn't recognize and couldn't access. But there were still traces. Draft emails. Calendar invites. A few odd photos saved to her downloads folder and then renamed with dates like invoice_2023Q4.jpg. Amateur mistakes. One image stopped me cold. It wasn't of them kissing or in bed. That would have been too easy. It was a photo of Caleb, alone, in what looked like a waiting room. A hospital bracelet visible on his wrist. Underneath the photo, she'd written, "He doesn't know I'm here. I needed to see him this way. Vulnerable." That line sat with me like a stone in my throat. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I should have. It wasn't just romantic. It was intimate. Not lustful, not reckless. It was the kind of line you write when you want to possess someone completely. Or worse, when you already feel like you do. I started digging deeper. Searched the hospital name printed faintly on the bracelet. A small local facility about 30 minutes outside the city. Nothing special. I called pretending to be a billing rep, just to see if the name Caleb Levin had any records on file. And he did. Psychiatric services. 3 visits. I didn't know what to do with that at first. I sat on the couch holding the phone, blinking in nothing. My thoughts scattered in 10 directions. This wasn't about shaming him. It wasn't about weakness. It was about her knowing. She'd been there. Supporting him. Carrying his secrets in the shadows while I was home making dinner and Googling anniversary getaways. It hit me. She'd become his anchor while slowly cutting the cord that tied her to me. And she hadn't once mentioned it. Not once. Not even in her pathetic defense the night I showed her the photo. She hadn't told me that Caleb was fragile, that he was spiraling, that he had history, dependency, instability, pain. I didn't get to know that part of the story because, in her mind, I didn't deserve to. That's when my hands started to shake. Not out of anger, but dread. What if I confronted him? What if he wasn't just the other man, but something more dangerous? Someone unbalanced, volatile, clinging to her like a raft? And worse, what if she liked that? What if she felt needed in a way I could never offer? What if this wasn't about romance or lust, but rescue? That night, she came home late again. She didn't say where she'd been. I didn't ask. Instead, I watched her from the hallway mirror as she removed her shoes and rubbed her temples like someone who was carrying a burden too big for the room she walked into. "You're quiet lately," she finally said. I laughed, soft and hollow. "You only notice when I stop making things easy." She didn't respond, didn't apologize. Just walked upstairs and shut the bedroom door like a punctuation mark I hadn't earned. I sat on the floor and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours, wondering how many people lived double lives so cleanly. How someone could build one version of themselves in your home and another across town and move between them like actors changing stage costumes. But I wasn't going to be the quiet one anymore. I wasn't going to keep folding like paper every time she leaned on her silence. I sent Caleb a message. Just one sentence. "Does she love you, or does she just hate me?" He didn't reply right away, but I saw the read receipt. 2 hours later, I got an email. No greeting. No sign-off. Just, "She's the one who said we could stop hiding. That she was already out. Guess she forgot to tell you." Attached was a photo. A selfie. Taken in her car. His arm around her shoulder. Her hand on his chest. Dated 3 months ago. 3 months. Which means every moment since then, every kiss, every dinner, every shared cup of coffee was already a lie. And she was already gone. I sat in the dark, holding that image like a confession. But the worst part wasn't seeing them together. It was realizing that she had made the first move. And I wasn't even the last to know. She came home humming. That's what broke me. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't the smell of wine on her breath or the text she forgot to send. It wasn't even the knowledge, etched into my chest like a scar, that she'd spent the day with him again. It was the humming. Off-key. Thoughtless. A tune I didn't recognize. Light, carefree, like nothing was burning beneath her feet. Like I didn't exist. I was sitting at the dining table, hands folded, laptop still open in front of me with the photo Caleb had sent. I had stared at it long enough to know every pixel. Her smile. His hand. Her ring missing. The timestamp. That stupid air freshener dangling from the rear view. All of it burned into my eyes. She walked past me, keys tossed onto the counter like always, as if she hadn't detonated our life, and then wandered back in like she was returning from yoga. "Hey," she said, stretching. "I'm starving." I didn't answer. She opened the fridge, took out a yogurt, and began peeling the lid like this was any other night. I watched her from across the room, watched the way her shoulders moved, the way her mouth curled slightly when she tasted the first spoonful. I studied her like a stranger, like a ghost wearing her skin. Then I closed the laptop slowly and said, "Caleb says you're out." The spoon paused in midair. Silence. She didn't turn around. She just stood there, facing the fridge, like maybe if she didn't move, I'd disappear. I repeated it, slower. "He said you told him you were out, that you'd stopped hiding." Still, nothing. No denial. No shock. Just the sound of the spoon slowly clinking against the ceramic counter as she set it down. Then, finally, she turned. And I will never forget the expression on her face. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was relief. Like she didn't have to keep holding the lie anymore. Like I'd unknowingly opened the cage for her, and she could finally breathe without pretending it was for me. "You went through my things?" she asked, voice soft but sharp. I blinked. "That's what you care about right now?" "I'm not angry," she continued. I knew it would come out eventually. I didn't want it to be like this." "Then how did you want it?" I asked. "A toast? A farewell dinner? A PowerPoint explaining why your work emergencies smelled like cologne and cheap hotel sheets?" She winced, but didn't look away. I stood up. The room felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were leaning in. Like the truth had weight, and it was pressing down on every object between us. "You chose him," I said. 3 months ago. And every day since. You just didn't have the spine to tell me. It wasn't that simple." "No," I snapped. "It's actually very simple. You lied. Repeatedly. You let me pour every ounce of love I had left into this hollowed-out version of our marriage while you gave your real life to someone else. That's not complicated. That's cruel." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't believe them anymore. I couldn't. Not after the week she let me cook for her, comfort her, sleep beside her while she let another man into the spaces I didn't even know she'd emptied. "I didn't know how to leave you," she said finally, voice cracking. "You did," I said coldly. "You just didn't want to be the villain. So you let me carry it. You let me be the clueless, desperate fool so you could be the one who had no choice." She looked at me then, truly looked, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Darvin. But I didn't want sorry. Sorry was a bandage after a stabbing." "You said you wanted to choose him," I continued. "Well, good. You have. I just want to know when you were planning to let me in on the vote." She couldn't answer. Because she wasn't. She'd written her version of closure long before I opened that hotel room door. She had rehearsed this ending in Caleb's car, in late-night texts, in the mirror while I was sleeping. I was the final scene she didn't want to film. But I was done being quiet. I reached into my bag, pulled out the envelope she wrote, the one I found under her seat, and placed it on the table between us. Her breath caught. "I read it," I said. "Every word. And I'm not even mad about it. I'm mad that you couldn't say it to my face." Tears finally fell. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just slow. Sincere, maybe. But I couldn't trust that anymore. She tried to speak, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said. "I'm not even here to understand. I'm just here to tell you something you forgot to consider." "What?" I stepped closer, lowered my voice so she'd hear every syllable. "I would have let you go. I would have hurt, but I would have understood. You didn't have to kill everything on your way out." That broke her. Her knees buckled slightly, and she leaned against the counter like she was finally starting to feel the weight of what she'd done. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and opened the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice trembling. I turned back once. "Out," I said. I didn't go far that night. Just drove. No destination, no plan, just open roads and quiet, because the silence in my own car didn't lie to me the way hers did. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to prove I was enough, or trying to decode someone else's shifting heart. I wasn't folding, shrinking, or apologizing for not being who she wanted. I was just existing unedited. At a red light, I pulled over and parked on the edge of a small overlook just outside the city. You could see everything from there. Miles of headlights and buildings and lives happening below me, people who would never know that tonight. My marriage ended quietly and without fireworks. No slammed doors. No broken dishes. Just two people in a kitchen, breathing the wreckage. I watched the horizon turn blue with the first light of morning and realized something I hadn't let myself think in weeks. I was going to be okay. Not immediately. Not painlessly. But eventually. Because as much as I had been torn open, I wasn't broken. I was still here. Still breathing. Still able to choose what came next. And for once, what came next wouldn't be built around someone else's comfort. That day, I took the first steps. I called my brother, someone I hadn't really opened up to in years, and told him everything. He listened without judgment. Told me to crash at his place for a while, no questions asked. It felt strange packing a bag with no timeline, no promises, just space. I left her a note on the counter. No anger. No dramatic last word. There's nothing left to discuss. You're free. So am I. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. It felt terrifying and clean, like pulling a splinter you've lived with for too long. It hurt, but the ache was honest. And then, something unexpected happened. A month after moving in with my brother, I got a call from an old friend. Gemma. We'd worked together years ago. She heard what happened through mutual circles and wanted to check in. What started as a short conversation turned into coffee. Then a walk. Then another. There was no rush. No pressure. Just a safe space to laugh again. She didn't ask me to forget what happened. She just let me be human again, flawed, healing, whole. Today, almost a year later, I look back and feel, not regret, but gratitude. Gratitude that I learned what not to accept. Gratitude that I finally stood up for myself, even if it took being broken to find that spine. Leona and I finalized everything without drama. She didn't fight me on anything. Maybe guilt did what words never could. I don't hate her. I don't miss her either. Sometimes people don't betray you to hurt you. Sometimes they just want out and don't know how to do it without collateral damage. But now, I've learned that I was never the collateral. I was the one who stayed kind in the storm. And I'm still here. Still building something better. This time for me.